I thought I would start, I think, with your father's side because I think that's probably the easier side.
There's not so much just to know there, yes.
Yeah, so your father, William Sterling Campbell, 1901 to 1953, and his parents, James Craig Campbell and Elizabeth Kilgore.
That's right, Elizabeth Kilgore, yes.
Yes, so they were both from Londonderry.
Both from Londonderry, yes.
As far as we know, born there.
Born there, yes.
And I think they would have called it Londonderry.
And they would have called it Londonderry, absolutely.
Derry, because
Londonderry. And I still call it Londonderry. I always call it Londonderry.
Yes.
We did go there.
Yeah.
Yes. But we were only there for a day, and I'd have liked more time. Yeah.
I tell you the story. We were there for a day too.
Yes.
And we drove into the town, found a place to park, and it was sort of spitting raining a little bit. And we got out and just sort of started to walk around. Then it started to rain more heavily, and we dived into the nearest place we could get to, get in out of the rain, which was a pub. We went in there and sort of sat down and started to look around, and clearly we were in a Republican stronghold because there was all this stuff, pictures of Michael Collins and
right.
Irish flags and guns on the wall. Goodness.
Interesting. We did have an overnight there, come to think of it, so we must have been there for more than one day. But and we walked around the walls, but I would have liked to have gone to try to find out where they lived or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I've dug up any more information about that. Do you know how long the family had been there?
No, I don't, and that's something I really would like to know. As to when I understand that it probably was longer than it seems. Like they did originally came from Scotland.
Yes,
but
yes.
I've got and unless we can get stuff that goes back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I did find somewhere that gave the surnames of the original Ulster plantation people from the 18th century.
Oh, okay.
And Campbell is there, but then that's such a common name.
Campbell's a very common name.
Kilgore obviously is a Scottish name.
That's a Scottish name,
but
yes.
It's not in that list of the originals.
And there are more Campbells in Ireland than there are Scottish names. The really Scottish names.
Yeah. So, but in any case, they came out to Australia at some point.
Yes, yes.
And
I think I can't remember what date Uncle Bob was born. It is there, I think. But yes, they came out, and they had him, obviously. Yeah.
And there they had 11 children.
Yes.
6 of whom died as infants.
Yes, very much so, yes. Which is rather sad, isn't it?
Very, very sad. Not hugely uncommon, I guess, either to have very large families or to have a high infant
mortality. I guess maybe they had more children to try and increase the family, but I don't know.
Yeah. And again, I'm not quite sure about the order of birth here, but it seemed that they, had a succession of tragedies in that sense.
Yes.
But they appeared to have been in Sydney first and then gone to
apparently,
Cobar or
and
Orange.
I didn't know that until fairly recently. I had no idea until I saw the births that they'd been.
Okay.
And I think from looking at it, I remembered that then there was one born back in Sydney, and then they went back to the country again.
It looks like it could be.
A bit like that, yeah. I think
so.
It's
a bit hard to tell, First one born in Cobar, and then several more in Orange.
Yes.
And I wondered if, maybe if you were in Cobar, you went to Orange for the births.
Possibly.
Particularly if you had a history of
bad problems, yes.
And maybe even they went to Sydney. Maybe they were still, who knows.
Yeah, who knows. Yeah.
So you don't know why they were in Cobar and Orange?
I have no idea. I can only thinking of the times that it was, whether work was more available in the country. That's the only thing I could possibly think of. Okay. I do seem to remember that there were 2 different addresses in Sydney, and so maybe one was before and one was when they came back.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think one was Crown Street, one was Riley Street, something like that.
An electoral roll in Newtown, but also I think born in Crown Street. If I've got that right.
Yes, that other William Sterling was born in Crown Street too, I think.
But
it's a bit sad in a way, because well, I guess we talk about this later, but Dad was away, so there's a lot of time that I didn't spend with him.
Yes. Yeah.
And learn stuff, yeah.
Mm.
And being the youngest of the family, there wasn't much contact with anybody else either. Yeah.
Okay. So, only 3 of those 11 children lived sort of to middle age, being Robert,
who was the eldest. Yes.
And then, then Gordon?
Yes.
And then Bill.
And then Bill, yes.
Born in 1901 in Sydney.
That's right,
presumably
yes.
Gordon and Robert?
Knew Robert very, very well. He was a lovely elderly uncle.
Right.
Yes, lovely elderly uncle. And Robert Gordon I had met a few times. Yes,
Yeah,
didn't
so
know
he
him
died
so
in
well.
1958,
Yes,
so he was certainly
yes, exactly. Yes.
around. But both of them died before me.
So I think Uncle Bob was the one who lived the longest, because Dad...
Yeah, so, he died in 1959.
And he was the eldest child born overseas.
Yeah.
And he was the longest lived.
Yes. Okay, so I think I was going to ask somewhere later on that obviously there seemed to be in the, Sefton, Bass Hill, and you, of course, ended up at Yagoona in that sort of area.
Yes.
There must have been a lot of family living there.
Yes. So, I mean, they were living in Newtown when I was born in Burwood, living in Newtown. Went back for a few months, and I obviously don't remember anything about that. And I've often been going to go and try and find the house, but it's probably been knocked down. I think it was a terrace.
Okay.
Terrace. Then we moved to Sefton until I was about 4, then to Chester Hill.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will come to that.
Right.
So what else did I have? Yes. I guess then on to your mother's side, just briefly. Ivy Doris, born 1902 and 1979 to 1979.
That's right, yes.
And she was one of 6 children?
6 children, yes.
Yeah, so Edith, Alma, Amy, of course, who I knew.
Yes.
Lived to 1987.
Millicent Amy, yes.
Millicent Amy, yes, I should say.
Yes.
Then Arthur William and Thomas Benjamin, who of course I didn't know. And Vera died in 1965.
Yes. Yes.
So, Arthur William died in 1972.
Yes.
I obviously was 12 at that stage, but I have no recollection whether I
he
met
was
him
ill for a long time. He lived on the lower mountains. He went to live on the lower mountains, right. Yes.
Yeah, so I sort of no knowledge or memory, if I ever did meet him, of ever doing so.
As a bit of a side thing, the house at Emu Plains was sold in 1970, and my brother Arthur and my uncle Arthur were the ones who handled the sale. Yeah.
Yes, so they obviously were very much folk. I think they were all born sort of in Penrith or in Emu Plains.
They were all born at home.
Yeah, okay.
All born at
Emu Plains.
In Wedmore Street. Wedmore Road, Emu Plains, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So what was, how did the farm come about? Do you know how they managed to get the farm and all that sort of stuff?
I understand that it had been in the family for quite some time.
Right.
There was a house on it, and I think grandfather's brother had been living in the house. Grandma was born at Kingswood. Grandfather was born a bit further down, I've forgotten now, not Blacktown, but down that way a bit further.
South Creek. There's a lot of South Creeks.
South Creek, that's right, sort of a bit further down. How they met, I don't know, although I have a feeling that they probably knew each other. Grandma Clissold's mother died in 1892.
Yes.
And her father died in 1899. And they married very soon after, so I have a feeling that they had been together or seeing each other. And then when her father died, they married.
Yeah.
And I also think that probably, I wondered about our darling Uncle Ben. I knew Uncle Ben so well. He was the youngest. I have a fear he was only a child. And I have a feeling that they might have taken him to Emu Plains with them to live.
Uncle Ben, is that Thomas? Or who's...
No. Uncle Ben was Grandma's youngest brother.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
You haven't got him.
He's probably in there. I just haven't not in my mind.
He was a
these
child.
purposes.
He was a child. Emma was the eldest, and then Grandma, and then there were some other children. And Uncle Ben was the youngest. And as I said, I knew him very well. And I think, I don't know, I think maybe that then Grandma and Grandpa married, and they possibly would have taken him with them to live.
Right.
But the house at Emu Plains that they lived in on that property had, I think, belonged to grandfather's brother, or he had lived there.
Okay.
And so then they lived there for the rest of their lives.
So it must have been, must have got that property very, very early.
Very, very early. The Clissolds, when they came out, settled in the Penrith area, and my great uncle was a builder.
Yes.
Okay. So
Thomas
I
Daniel.
think that the Clissold name in Penrith was quite well known. Yes, so the family was well known. Yes.
Yeah. All right. I'm sure we'll get on to life at the farm, because you spent a lot of
Great
time
time.
there.
Yes.
Do you know anything about how your parents met?
I don't really. Isn't it interesting? Yes. I Bondi comes into it somewhere along the line, going to swim at Bondi. So,
according to the electoral rolls, is resident in Newtown.
That's right.
At that sort of time.
Yes.
As a young man.
They certainly didn't meet over work or anything like that, or church or anything like that. So they met out in the community somewhere.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that Bondi had something to do with it.
Perfect place to go swimming.
Exactly.
I guess, so.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And Mum used to go swimming.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's, I guess, a bit of background information from where we get to you, and you've said here you were born in Burwood, October 1934.
In 1934. That's right. Yes.
So your parents were at that stage. Obviously, you were the second child.
I was the second child.
Arthur,
yes.
how many years older?
7.5 years.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was in hospital, having been knocked down by a motor car in King Street, Newtown.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely. So, and of course, in those days, they didn't tell the children that there was another baby on the way. He didn't know anything about it. And he came home from hospital to find Mum in bed with a baby sister.
Much to his
Which
disgust.
didn't please him very much. No, so yes, because Aunt Emma, my great Aunt Emma, had the private maternity hospital in Burwood Road, so that's where I was born, yes.
Right.
And where I spent a lot of my time in ongoing years, because it was, particularly when the family moved to Umina Beach, because it was always there. And that's where I was married from.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
it was a lovely home, beautiful home, yeah.
So I guess just because of that age difference, you wouldn't have been very close to Arthur.
I wasn't, no, I
and
wasn't.
I remember him, obviously, as an adult, as being a fairly gruff and opinionated sort of chap.
Yes. My brother Arthur and my uncle Arthur were, I think, cut from the same piece of cloth,
Really?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ah,
Definitely
right.
genes at work there, yes.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
No, we weren't close. That age difference, particularly with an older brother, is quite a lot. And then, of course, Dad being away at the war didn't help either, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so you were born in Great Aunt Emma's maternity hospital in Burwood Road.
I was.
And she was the one that had married
Conrad Mears.
Conrad Mears. Yes, did you
Yes.
know him at all?
No, I didn't.
he
He
died in
died just
62,
before I was born. But on looking at recent things, the Mears family came from the Penrith area.
Right.
So I think they knew each other probably there.
Yeah, that's sorry, he died in 1934.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, you say you lived in Newtown
Yes.
for a little while
Yeah.
before your memory, I guess.
Yeah, before my memory, because I think I was only a few months old when we came to Sefton.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, what are your earliest memories?
Good question, isn't it? People ask this all the time of people, yes. I remember The fact that you have a photograph of the house you lived in doesn't help, because
Yes.
I know what the house looked like, and I went back there several times in the years to come to have a look at it. It's not there anymore. One thing I remember is standing at the front gate with people going past and talking to people. And the other thing was, apparently there was a terrazzo step, either going from the kitchen upstairs or from it, and I was constantly falling up that and hitting my head.
Right.
But apart
That could
from
be right.
apart from that, I really don't remember anything about living at Sefton. No, I was still a bit young, I think, too.
Yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah, well, it's often hard to date those memories, because for a long time I thought my earliest memory was standing in the lounge room at Yaguna,
Yes.
looking out the window, watching Jeffrey go off to school.
All right.
And I assumed, therefore, that must have been before I was of school age.
Yes.
But it later occurred to me it may well have been that I was homesick, and I was just gleefully watching him to go off to school while I was sick.
Could well be.
So I don't remember.
Could well be.
Which of those it might
Yes.
be.
Yes, so as for Sefton itself, Sefton is very clear to me, because when we moved to Chester Hill, I was often at Sefton anyway.
Yeah.
So that the area is very familiar to me, but I don't really... Now, wait a minute. Going back to... I was 3. We had to have injections for,
Right.
the normal stuff that you have, but you had to go more than once. And I do remember this, lining up at Bankstown with all the other mums and kids getting an injection. And I had a reaction to one of them, and I spent 3 months in bed. Now, I've got a very vague recollection of that. I had a very serious reaction to diphtheria. It was the diphtheria injection, I was told. Yeah.
Oh.
But apart from that, no.
Yeah, okay. And then, yes, Chester Hill.
Yes. I don't know why we moved to Chester Hill, whether we, I don't know.
Okay. Now, you said your father was in the Black Watch. And
Yes, he was.
White Horse. I wasn't actually aware of, I did a little bit of research yesterday, I wasn't actually aware of what that was, the idea of having, outside of the army, these almost militias.
Yeah, they were, yes.
Yeah, so I hadn't realised what that was all about.
Yes, and I don't know a lot about it either, because then the war came, but you've got photos, you've seen the photos of him in his kilt.
Yes.
And then there's another photo of him in a horse team, on the lead horse of a horse team, and I'm not sure whether that was the day that the Harbour Bridge was opened.
Yes.
I think it might be, because I understand that he was on the lead horse team that went across the bridge.
Yes, yeah, I've heard that before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's just something I've heard. And I'm thinking that maybe that photograph with all those horses and Dad sitting on the lead horse, that it may have been the day. That was down in College Street, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so of course the war came along, and he sort of, as most of the people, I guess, who are in those regiments,
enlisted very early.
Joined up very early,
Yeah.
and went off to the Middle East.
Yes, off to the Middle East.
And there are lots of photos, of course, of that.
Miles. And he was a bit of a photographer too, fortunately.
Yes,
so there were lots of photographs of that time, yes.
Yes, and I remember there was one of them, I can't remember which one, but marked on the back of it, it says, with my new camera.
Yes. He had one of those cameras that was, I think I gave it to you eventually.
I know, that was, we were saying the other day, I've
don't know where it is.
I've lost it somewhere.
This is what happens, yes.
I can't imagine why, because I never would have thrown it out.
But see, there are lots of photos of me when I was little. I don't think there's anything very much during the war years. But when Dad came back, there were more photos.
Yeah.
Yes. But he took photos over there, so, that was...
Yeah, well, certainly lots of those.
Yeah.
And then he came home.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as a carpenter, he wasn't sort of on the front line.
And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, actually, and saying that it was about the war, and fortunately my father was in workshops. He was He was a craftsman, so he was in workshops the whole time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then when he came back for a while before then going off to New Guinea.
Yes.
Do you know how long he was home between those engagements? I imagine probably not long.
It wouldn't have been very long. He came home, and I think almost immediately had an attack of appendicitis and went into Concord Hospital.
Right.
I remember going to Concord Hospital to see him there. Then he was sent down to Bandiana, to the camp at Bandiana. And Mum and I went down there and stayed in Wodonga rented a house, or part of a house in Wodonga for 6 weeks. And so we were able to see a lot of him then. Then he went up to Lae in New Guinea.
Yeah. And so I think I told you before, I was quite, really liked this photo.
Oh, yes. Now, that was taken on the Georges River at Karama.
Yes.
Yes, and that was during the war. See, Mum was good. She'd take us out rowing. Yeah.
But was this while he was here? While he was home? Because I was wondering who took the
Now
photo.
that is a very good question, isn't it? It may well have been before he went away. I'm only very young there, so I don't know how old I am there.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any date.
Unless there was somebody else with us.
On the photo. Yeah.
I'd never actually thought about that, to be quite honest. But Arthur looks... I think that might be before he went away.
Yeah.
Because Arthur looks about 11, 12 there.
Yeah, I'm hopeless at dating ages of children.
And I don't know how old I looked there, maybe 4, 5, which was
Yeah.
about the age Dad went overseas.
Yeah.
So it might have been just before he went.
Yeah. Because, there are a couple... There's another photo, I think, that has your mum probably wearing the same dress, which obviously then would have presumably been the same time. And then there's another one where she's wearing something different, so
right.
Clearly it was...
I do remember her taking us up to the river, and yes.
Yeah, okay. And you talk a little bit about, riding your bike around what you call the countryside.
The countryside of Chester Hill. Chester Hill was a very small place.
Countryside because it was semi-rural.
It was semi-rural in those days.
Yeah.
Yes, there weren't that many houses really. There was one shop.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so
a few houses
very,
so really, and people didn't have cars.
Yeah.
So, as friends, we used to ride from Chester Hill to Fairfield, which was a fair way. We'd be gone all day.
Yeah.
Just riding your bikes around. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, generally speaking, what was life like in Chester Hill for a young girl in those days?
I thought life was rather good because it was, well, from age, let's say 4, 5 to 11, it was war years, and I guess things were fairly, and I started school. Most of my primary school was at that time. Yeah. So, look, it was the time where even if you were 5 years old and you had a friend 2 blocks away, you were allowed to go and visit them. Yeah. These days you can't do that. And you'd be told by your mother, you tell so-and-so's mother to send you home at 4:30, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You were allowed to roam around.
Yes. So obviously, no TV.
No TV.
Did you sort of sit around in the evenings and listen to the radio?
Dad and Dave?
Dad and Dave, okay.
Yes, we did. Yes. And I remember I used to have puzzles that I did with little beads in them that should make patterns and things like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. But generally, yes, you listen to the radio a lot. Several serials on radio that everyone
Blue Hills,
listened to.
or is that even
That was
after?
That was a bit after, yes.
Yeah.
There was another one, Dad and Dave and Martin's Corner. Martin's Corner
okay.
came before Dad and Dave.
Right.
I think 6:30 and 7, something like that.
You were just about to describe your brother's wedding.
Yes, that's right.
Or the events leading up to. Or...
Yes. So that was in... I was going to tell you now, wasn't I? I was 13, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes, 13, nearly 14. I was, yes. Yes, so he married and I was bridesmaid. And an interesting little snippet here, the little bluebird brooch they gave me for being bridesmaid, I recently gave to Amy's daughter, my great niece,
Right.
because, yes, I thought I want to give that to somebody in the family who was connected to it, you know, so I did that. Yes, so he married and I had, I looked horrible. You've seen the photos.
Yes, there's plenty of photos. You and the best man, Bob Welch or something.
Bob Welch was the local butcher, and he was the best man.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
he was the best man at the wedding. Yes, and I wasn't very tall, and I had this dress, and of course, it was just after the war, and so there was no money. You had to have coupons to buy all that stuff. So I wore a dress that Letty had, my sister-in-law. Letty had been for a ball gown or something, and it was too big for me, and it was on the floor and all that. And then they stuck these 3 big pink camellias across the top of my head. It is. Amy was laughing about it the other day. It was hideous.
And there's the hand colorized versions as well.
Well, that's right. Yes, that's right. Because photographs, you didn't have color photography, so everything was coloured in, and your faces were made up by the studio, like you had thick makeup on. Yes.
Yes.
And I'd have had nothing, I imagine.
Yes, well, they didn't have Photoshop where they could do things
No.
delicately.
No, you forget about this, don't you? Yes.
Yeah. So a wedding, I guess, Big Brother's wedding must have been a big occasion.
It was a big occasion, yes. It didn't, it was, and it didn't have a great big reception. It was a fairly small wedding, and the reception was held back at Letty's parents' home.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite a thing, and I guess at the time I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm not so sure.
And you're also saying that, or your brother Arthur was in the police and in the army at various times.
He wanted to join the army when he was 16.
Just a bit young?
He was young. He was too young. He came to Mum and said he wanted her to sign the papers, and she wouldn't. She wouldn't sign them. So the war ended just about the time he was able to join up, and he joined up immediately and was sent up to the islands and sent up with all those army people who were sent up to clean up, basically, after the war and sort of set things to right again. So
okay, I didn't realise he'd ever actually been in the army and gone overseas, even if it was, after the war.
Yeah, but it wasn't in wartime. It was more doing the cleaning up and and helping, I guess, the New Guineans and so on. Yeah.
Okay. So
and it was after that, of course, that he would have joined the police force. Yes.
After that, okay. Yes, I think you said that you were probably too young to sort of really understand what was going on with
the war. I think you didn't, because it wasn't in Australia, or at least later. At the time, nobody knew that Darwin had been bombed. It wasn't.
Yeah.
You'd know now. You'd know the second it happened, but not then. Nobody found out until later that Darwin had been bombed. So the war wasn't taking place here. It was over there. And you didn't have television. You had a radio. If there'd been television, you'd have known all about it, but there wasn't. So you knew it was a war, whatever a war is to a child. You know.
Yes, yeah.
So you haven't got the horrors of the war. So so he went up there after the war.
And but I think you mentioned rationing before. I imagine that probably went on for some time.
Rationing didn't start at the beginning of the war. Once again, I haven't got any dates here, but we had books of coupons, and everyone had a certain number of coupons, and there was a certain amount of, if you didn't need any more of these coupons, then you could, you'd give them to somebody else or whatever. And this basically is what happened when going back to Arthur and Letty's wedding, is that there weren't enough coupons to buy new clothes. So you did with what you had.
Yeah. So how long did that last for? Do you remember? So I remember
some years, and it went on till after the war. And actually, I do have a book of coupons.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'll let you have those sometime.
I remember reading somewhere, particularly about England or the UK.
Yes.
that rationing there after the war went on for a decade.
Yes, and I can't
certain
remember
things,
how
anyway.
long it went on here. Can't remember, but it did go on after the war. But you had coupons for clothing, coupons for food, and so on. Yes.
And do you remember it as being sort of hard and with things
No.
being scarce? Or?
Things were scarce, but we had a huge backyard at Chester Hill, and Mum grew everything, like all the vegetables and stuff that we needed. So we were pretty well off there.
Yeah.
And the nearest butcher was at Sefton, and I used to ride my bike back to Sefton to get the meat.
There you go. Yeah, okay. And then I know a big part of fond memories or your life at the time was Emu Plains and going out to Emu Plains
Absolutely,
on holidays.
spent a lot of time up there. I think the first time I spent any great time up there, I was only about 3, and that was because Arthur had broken his leg and was put into hospital, and I think it was thought that it was probably better if I stayed with my grandparents for the time being, and I can remember that. I loved them. I mean, I loved my soul grandparents, and I knew them so well. But I can remember as like a lot of children do, if you probably think about it, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, if they're away from their home, they start to get a bit tearful, a bit, I want to go home. And I can remember my grandfather picking me up, taking me down to the chook yard and doing stuff down there. It was lovely, yes, looking after me until it was time to put me to bed, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. And holidays there, I think you mentioned.
Holidays, lots of holidays up there, and often weekends. Once I went to high school and was a Parramatta, I was allowed occasionally to go up to Emu Plains for the weekend.
Up on the steam train.
On the steam train, yes.
Yeah.
Stopped at all stations, yes. And grandfather would be waiting in the station yard with the horse and sulky, usually. Yeah. Sometimes I had to walk, but usually he was waiting for me, yes. Yeah.
So when would that have been?
I was high school 47, 48 and 49.
Right, okay. So, in those days, did he have a car or a truck?
No wheels. Okay. Only the wheels on the sulky.
Oh, right, okay.
They never learned to drive.
I guess out in that area as well.
You didn't need.
Yeah.
I think over the road they had a dairy farm, and I think they had a vehicle, and if it was absolutely necessary to get somewhere, then he would drive somebody, but generally it was just the horse and sulky.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, somewhere amongst the photos there's one of Arthur standing next to a car.
That's
looking with sort of...
Is that Arthur is that my Arthur or Uncle Arthur? Your great uncle. Yes, that one. Yes, that's absolutely. He'd have been the first one to have a vehicle.
Yeah, he sort of looked. He's got a proprietary air over it.
Absolutely, so. He did about everything, like his nephew.
Okay.
Peas in a pod, they were.
Right. Okay.
They got on very well too.
Right.
And so when we went shopping. When I was staying up there, it would be the sulky, and grandfather would go down and get the sulky stayed in the barn up near the house. The horse was down in the paddock. He'd go and get the horse, bring it up, put it in, and we'd trot off to Penrith to do the shopping.
So I guess it probably wasn't Woolworths.
It wasn't Woolworths. It was Neil's.
Like? Right.
Neil's had everything. Yes.
And was it a supermarket self-service kind of thing, or did you go to the counter and tell them what you wanted? No, go to the counter and
tell them what you wanted. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Which it was. For me also, even when we were first married, supermarkets were just starting to come in, really. Yeah. They had a cash and carry. That was the first thing. It was called a cash and carry.
Right.
Yeah, it was sort of the forerunner of the supermarket. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we used to often trot into Penrith, and often grandfather would give me the reins. Let me drive the horse.
Didn't have any accidents?
No, didn't. No.
Well, at least I suppose they were not exactly self-driving vehicles, but
pretty much. The
horse knew the way.
Yes.
Probably.
Well, horses could learn what to do, and going back like around that time, I suppose, the baker always had a horse.
Yes.
And he'd stop at your place and come in, and he'd go out, and the horse would have trotted on to the next stop.
Yes,
they
I
knew
remember you telling me
exactly
this
what to
before.
do.
The horse knew which stops.
Which absolutely, which
autopilot.
Yeah.
So
clever horses.
yeah. Well, I suppose we talk about when self-driving vehicles will get to that level of sophistication. Might be a while yet.
The saddest day I ever had up there was when a horse died. I don't know if I've told you this or
No, I
not.
haven't heard this.
He was breaking in Dolly, who was a lovely horse, and Douglas was with me, and we were down in the yard, and he was starting to break in this horse, and something happened, and the horse fell and broke her neck. And it was absolutely devastating. I don't really remember what grandfather was like, but all I can remember him, and I don't know how old would have been, 9, something like that, turning around to Douglas and myself and saying, "Go up to the house, would you please? Just go up to the house." And we did later on see him digging the hole to put the horse in. That was devastating.
Yeah.
And of course, he had to get through that. Yes, an awful thing to have to get through.
Yeah.
So that was a bad time for Grandma and Grandpa, really. Yeah. But these things really stick in your mind. Yes, I can remember the horse falling, and why it broke its neck. It's just the way it fell, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah.
So what other memories have you got
of up there? Playing generally with cousins who often came over. We'd wander all around the property, and often up into the bush, and grandfather would take us up into the bush, and there'd be trees with berries on, and he'd say, "Well, you can eat those, but you can't eat those." And he'd take us for walks and tell us. And he also had some Aboriginal items that he had found up in the bush, because their property was right at the beginning of the first, as you go up into the Blue Mountains, and so their property bordered that. So it was an interesting place. Yeah. Do you remember much about Emu Plains?
I remember honeysuckle.
Yes, we did that a lot.
Yes. I can't remember quite where it was. It was on a fence near the
It was a
house
fence it was in several places.
Outside, yeah.
It was in several places. Yes.
I remember
There was a lot of honeysuckle.
being shown how to go and suck the honey out of the honeysuckle.
Exactly. Yes.
I remember milking a cow.
Yes.
I don't think I really remember anything about inside the house or much.
No, you probably wouldn't. No. It was just a lovely old country and very old home. David and Ian has practically no recollections. I think David might have a little bit, but no, not really. Yeah.
So not very, very much. I mean, in later years, I certainly remember, going and visiting Grandma Clissold and Aunt Amy at Blacksland.
At Blacksland, yes, and then there is a photo that I keep on my desk in there of Grandma and Grandpa on a lounge at the side of the house.
Yes,
that
I've
photograph,
got that one,
and I think that was the day that we took you up as a new baby.
Right.
I think that was the day. Jeffrey used to perform little nursery rhymes for grandfather, would encourage him to do. When I look at that photo, I'm pretty sure that was the day that you were taken up.
Right.
To be shown off. Yes.
Right. And I think I remember. I mean, obviously, I remember being there with the honeysuckle, and I think I remember being there. The big treat there. We'd always go up and we'd get, Arnott's biscuits, and the family assorted.
That's
and all that sort
right.
Of stuff.
Yes.
There was always something to be had for afternoon tea.
Yes.
I think I remember that at Emu Plains
as
well as at Blacksland.
Yeah.
But I certainly remember Grandma Clissold and Aunt Amy. From those days.
Those days, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
lovely old ladies.
Of course, grandfather, you were. So grandfather must have died very soon after that photograph, because you were born in May. He died in September.
Right.
So it was somewhere in that period that photograph must have been taken.
Yeah. So that must have been pretty devastating. How did Grandma Clissold, and who was living there at the time? I guess Amy
well,
was.
Amy was there, and Amy had come home. Amy was a nurse, but they'd both got elderly, and she, not as old as I am now, actually, he wasn't.
Yes.
But she'd gone home to look after them, and look after Grandpa in particular.
Right.
And they were sitting out on the front veranda, and she had left him to come inside to get something, and when she went back, he'd gone.
Wow.
It was just quite gentle and quick and so on. Now, Grandma's reaction, I don't remember, really. I don't remember. I remember going to the funeral, of course, and I must have left you home with Grandma. Because, probably fed you and left you there when the funeral was on. I've never thought about that. Yeah, because you and Jeff would have been there. Yeah. So I don't really know how she coped with that. Grandma was a person who never left the property. Very, very rarely did she leave the property. Everything came. The fishman came, and what else you needed, Grandfather would go into Penrith and get it. So she didn't go to church. She just stayed home. That was it. She stayed home. She was very quiet and a lovely grandma. But a lovely grandma. But she didn't get out and about.
Yeah.
No.
Every from the various photos at every age, they just look so comfortable and relaxed and nice, and even that wedding photo. They look such a gorgeous couple.
Yes. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Yes. And that was taken in Sydney. They were married in Penrith. I think they were married in Penrith. Yes. And then they came to the city for their honeymoon. And those photos. And it was always the man that was sitting down and always.
Yeah. I guess I don't know why.
That's the way it was.
Well, yes, but I mean, both standing up probably looks maybe a little bit. Not for a wedding photo, though, I suppose.
But you'll find that most wedding photos of that time, the gentleman is sitting and the lady is standing behind or at the side of him.
Probably because the man can't stay still long enough for the long exposures or
and it would have been long exposures, yes. Yes. I don't know what happened to the clothes. I didn't ever see them. I don't remember her having them. She may have had them, or she may have handed them to a sister to you to have. Yeah.
But that photo, the wedding photo, and then the photo was as elderly people sitting on the veranda.
On the veranda, yes, and that I don't have many photos around, but I have that photo sitting on. I just love that photo. And that's where I got to know Douglas so well, because Douglas lived at Kempsey.
Yes.
And his mother died when he was just 6 months old. So, and he used to, an aunt would bring him down and they'd stay for a week or something like that. And so that's how I really got to know Douglas so well.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened next? You were going to high school and...
Yes, so
you did some secretarial
studies?
I
went to high school. I had no particular vision about what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I wasn't a scholar as such. I'm more on the practical side, not a scholar. And Dad, when he came home from the war, he worked for Sydney City Council. Basically, he worked for other places too.
So what was he doing for them? Was he still carpentering?
Sometimes out in parks, building things out in parks, that sort of thing. He was carpentering, yes. And of course I was working at the Home Mission Society at the time he died, and he was building cupboards for them at that time. He didn't ever finish them. So, yeah. So what was the question?
Well, the question, I don't recall, but the question that's in my mind now is about your mother. Did she work? I mean, I know she trained.
Mum didn't work, no.
She had some nursing training?
She had some nursing training. She wasn't a trained nurse. She didn't have a piece of paper that said she is a trained nurse. She was taken, well, I'll say she was taken. Aunt Emma asked Grandma, could she have my mother to take her to the to work in the hospital when she was 12. Now, obviously, she went to Newtown High School and finished her schooling. Emma would have been absolutely certain about it. But once she finished her schooling, she started to work in the maternity hospital. And she was trained in obstetrics. She didn't have the piece of paper, but she was well trained, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But after that...
So she was living in Sydney.
Yes.
Yes, from the age of 12, yes.
Right. Okay. But after that, and after marrying, she didn't work.
She didn't work. No, she didn't work. No, they married. I don't know. She was just at home. Yes.
Well, which
I'm trying to
very
think.
common.
Trying to think back and think. I don't really know a lot about her life at that time. I don't think, except that there was nothing much to tell. I don't think, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was just a life at home,
Yeah.
and they had a child fairly quickly, and I guess she was at home, being a mother. It was depression times, of course, and Dad was out of work a lot.
Yeah.
So, life just went on. Arthur was born. Depression. I was born at the end of the Depression. Then it was World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, she didn't ever go out to work and get paid.
Yeah.
She used to work during the war. She'd go to Bankstown to make those netting. You know, the netting stuff, camouflage netting.
Yep.
A lot of women did that. They went over to big places and made camouflage netting and stuff like that. Yes. But she didn't ever get paid. No, she didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
She didn't. The only people she worked for were Emma. Yeah, that's it really.
Yeah.
Yes.
And whatever that.
Whatever.
Stuff.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, she didn't actually have a job she went to. No.
Yeah. Okay. So you were going off to Secretarial College.
I was, yes, in the city, Sydney Technical College. Yes.
And that was
For a year.
A year
It was
course.
a full year course.
And
Did the shorthand typing comptometer. Do you know what a comptometer is?
some sort of
Like a
adding
glorified adding
machine
machine,
thing?
yes.
Okay.
A glorified adding machine, yes. And speech training.
Speech training.
Do you know how you did speech training?
No.
You had a little bit of pencil about that, and you had to tie a string around it and put it between your teeth and learn to speak properly with that in your mouth.
Really?
Did it work? Yeah, that was speech.
I don't know.
Yes, rather than like that people don't really talk properly when you were
Okay,
taught
so
to
you
open
were
your mouth.
Taught to open your mouth and enunciate clearly.
Exactly,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
then obviously with that training.
So my first job was with a solicitor. That was for about a year, I think. Then I left there, and I think I had one very brief job, but then the Home Mission Society came up and I went to work there, yes.
Right.
Which
yes.
was which is what I loved, yes, yeah.
Okay.
So,
And then at some point, or in fact, I think you were saying that your father loved to go up to Umina
yes.
anyway,
Oh,
fishing.
fishing,
And it became
yes,
a sort of a place
yes.
to go.
He loved fishing. He had always loved fishing, I understand. We used to often take a cottage at South Woy Woy, go out in the boat and fish. And then we'd get the train and go up to Woy Woy for the day, and he'd fish from the baths, the baths or the ferry wharf or something, and fish all day. And I think at that point he decided that maybe it would be a good idea to go up there and live, which meant, of course, travelling down. So he bought the block of land, started to build a house. There was a little cabin on the back which had 2 rooms. And
Did he build that, or was that already?
no, that was already there.
Okay.
And so you could put 2 single beds in there and a bit of a bed in the other room that just had a sink and something. So when we went up for weekends, that's what we did. And he started to build a house. Yeah. And times I can't. Well, it must have gone fairly quickly because I had just turned 19 when he died, and we had at that stage actually gone up there to live. Yes. So it wasn't a finished house. It didn't have a bathroom. It didn't have a kitchen. So it was sort of, it wasn't rough living because we had the furniture and the rooms were all there and so on, but it was quite good.
Yeah. No, I do have much clearer memories
Of
your
course,
mind,
yes.
of course, because I was there.
Yes, do you the little cabin at the back? You went down the back steps and there was this little cabin,
Yes.
and if you We did actually put a bath in there in the end.
Mm.
And you had to pump water. There was no water.
Yes.
Yes. See, and Dad hadn't got to the stage of setting up the kitchen. So there was no plumbed water into the house. And after he died, several friends said they would finish the house for Mum. But she wouldn't ever do it. She just stayed with it the way it was. So if you wanted water, you went out the back and pumped the water.
Yes,
Yes.
I remember that.
Mm.
I didn't remember until now, but I remember
that.
Yeah,
yes,
I
they
remember the wooden handle.
That's right, and you had
handle.
to pump water. So yes. So why she would never have the house finished, I don't know.
Mm.
She'd have been so much more comfortable.
Yeah.
If she had. Yeah. The louvered veranda was there. It was perfectly livable house.
Yes.
Except that it didn't have a kitchen, and it didn't have a proper bathroom. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, so both you and your father
Yes.
were working in the city.
In the
and had
city,
to do that
yes.
long train trip.
That's right. And of course, Dad caught an earlier train than me. I can't remember what time he got up. I think I used to leave home to get a bus at 6:10. That's in my head. 6:10. Walk up the road to get the bus to Wairau Station to get the steam train.
Another steam train.
And you'd get out of the steam train at Hornsby and catch the fast train down the North Shore. Yes.
Right. Yeah. No, we were up at Bathurst last weekend, I think it was, and we visited. They've got a new railway museum.
Oh, have they?
Which is basically a big excuse to have a train set. They've got this big train set, sort of modelling the line around Bathurst. They were saying that, just mentioning at one point there, that they were still using steam trains steam locomotives for shunting.
Yes.
In the 70s.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah, they
Yeah.
were certainly around.
This is another little snippet, of course, is that where Grandma and Grandpa lived, the railway line was just up the hill. I don't know if you can remember that or not.
No.
And when we were there, staying there, all we kids would run up there when the trains were going through late in the afternoon, and you'd call out paper, and they'd finish with their papers, but then they'd throw their papers out. You've probably heard of things like that happening. And you call out paper, and somebody would throw out a paper for you. And then also the troop trains from out west, Orange and Dubbo particularly. The troop, Dad was out there too, and when they were coming back to board ship to go overseas, I do remember this. They couldn't tell you what train they were coming on. They had an idea of the time, and somehow you would get an idea, and you'd go up to the railway line. It sort of curved around at Grandma's place, and you went up the hill a bit, and they would. I think we saw. I think I did see Dad actually going past in the train, because they'd be watching. He'd be watching to see if there was anybody there, and interesting. Yeah.
So life went on at B Minor, I guess.
Life went on at G Minor. Yes, Dad worked. I worked, but it was only. I kept coming down to the city to the Home Mission Society, and then of course, and Mum was sick. The doctor put her into Gosford Hospital, and about 3-4 weeks after we moved there, Dad was a bit late getting up one morning, and I hurried him a bit, and he got on his. I've always, how you sort of blame yourself, but and I hurried because he wanted to go to work, and he'd overslept a little, and I hurried him up. And he rode his bike into the station for a change, which was a long way, and had a coronary and died on the station. Now, about 6:30 in the morning, a police car pulled up out the front.
Right.
And I had to go and identify his
I
body.
remember you telling me that.
Yeah. It's not something that bothers me, but I can bring it to mind very easily. He was in the goods shed.
Such an occasion,
and in the goods shed on a stretcher. Yes. The worst thing was that he died like that. But then we had to go and tell Mum, and this is one of the problems I had with my brother at that time, because our doctor was involved, of course, and I said, well, Mum has to know, and they said, oh no, we can't tell her. And I said, well, I can't go up to the hospital and see her because she's going to want to know where your father is. I said, so I phoned the hospital. They sedated her slightly, and we went up and told her. Yeah, so that was a bit hard, yes. So then life got a bit rougher, for a while, I had to give up working in the city because Mum was not well, and it was... I was away too long. I was away from 6 o'clock in the morning till at least 7 o'clock at night, and it was too long for her to be alone. So I got a job with a local doctor for some months, and then things settled down again, and I went back to work in the city for a while. Worked for an importing company. Yeah. Then after that, went to work for Gosfordshire Council.
In your minor.
Yes.
I think you were fairly active. I think you were a Sunday school teacher.
I was a Sunday school teacher. I was fellowship leader, Sunday school teacher. Yes.
And what else did
the
you
main
get up
church
to
was Woy Woy, and Umina Beach was the little. They were practically the one thing, but yeah.
A lot of beachy life as well.
A lot of beachy life as well, yes. But I wasn't a real beach person. But yes, I did go to the beach, and of course, Umina in those days was a few houses, one shop on a corner, and that was it. A bit different to what it is now. Then there was a shop that sold everything. Then there was the Seabreeze Cafe, but you didn't go to the Seabreeze. That's where the Bodgies and the Widgies hung out.
Oh, I see.
Do you know about Bodgies and Widgies?
Oh, I have a vague idea of Bodgies and Widgies, yes.
Yes. They weren't that bad.
Probably not, no.
And that was the Seabreeze Cafe, yes.
Yeah.
That was just those two places, yes.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, don't know if I'm missing anything in the middle, but you decided to go on a holiday, or your mother decided to go on a holiday.
My mother decided to go to Lord Howe Island, and I hadn't sort of been going to go with her, but I can't really remember whether I said, I'll come with you, or whether she said, do you want to come with me, or something like that.
Okay.
Yes, because I had been engaged to somebody else.
Yes, I
suppose I have to put that in.
Point.
Yes. A really nice, but you sort of started to feel that nothing wrong with him, nothing at all, but maybe that this wasn't the right person. Yes. So yes, we went to Lord Howe Island.
Wearing an engagement ring.
Wearing an engagement ring. Now I'm told, is he still standing there? Not that I'm going to tell any untruth. I don't remember actually taking it off, but apparently that's what I heard him say the other day. So maybe I did.
That's the story I heard.
Yeah, and maybe I jolly well did. Because yes, I had it on because I was still engaged, but I was on the point of maybe I should break this off. And so went over, and we had a really nice time over there. It was a lovely place, and yes, and I don't remember seeing Dick before we left, but he apparently saw Mum and I, and our flight was delayed 24 hours because we went over on flying boats in those days, and they landed in the lagoon, and if there was any bad weather, they couldn't land. So we were delayed 24 hours, or just about 24 hours. So we had to find accommodation for the night. And Anzac Day was involved there because I think we went to the dawn service on Anzac Day and then went to get the flying boat out at Rose Bay.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Yes. But no, that was lovely. And we've been back. We went there for... we had our honeymoon in Dungog, and then we've been to Lord Howe twice since. It's a lovely spot. Have you been to Lord Howe Island?
No.
You would enjoy it.
There was some talk that we might go there at some point before too much longer.
It really hasn't changed all that much. I mean, it has changed, obviously, but there are certain rules and regulations about it, and that can't change too much.
Okay. So I guess the other question I had was about how your mum coped after your father dying
after
and
Dad
then
died.
you getting married and leaving.
She coped very well, I thought. Yes, she certainly didn't discourage it by any means. No, I think after the initial, Mum was a person who really could take care of herself. She was a strong person.
Yes.
And while initially it was very, very difficult, Mum couldn't even come to the funeral. We bought as we'd only left Sydney a few weeks before, we came back to the church that we'd been going to and had Dad's funeral there. Mum was still in hospital, and so she didn't come to the funeral, but she came out. So the first few weeks particularly were, which is why I think I had to give up working in the city. It was too difficult to do that.
Yes.
and be away for so long. But she gradually made friends, and she belonged to the Progress Association and this and the that and she'd get out and about and go on trips, and she made a life for herself. Yeah.
Okay, and then early married life, you started off in Newcastle.
In Newcastle, yes, we met in Lord Howe Island. Dick had just taken a job in Newcastle. We married not quite 12 months later, not quite 12 months later, and went to live in Newcastle. Spent the first few months living in the front room of a house.
Yes.
But that wasn't all that bad, really, because the people were nice. They went away every weekend to their little cottage at Tanilba, so we had the house to ourselves. And Anne would... I was working then. I got a job in Newcastle, or I think it was a part-time job actually. Anne would cook their meal very early, and they'd take their meal. Television was just in. They'd take their meal into their bedroom and eat their meal and leave me the kitchen. They were very considerate. It was lovely, yes. And then each weekend they'd be away so we could invite friends home. And then, of course, I fell pregnant with your big brother, Jeffrey. And we thought, well, it's time we did something more serious, and got the flat in New Lambton, which was very nice.
Oh, yes.
Very nice, okay. Nice big flat. And then he was born at the Mater Hospital, and then I think Dad wasn't all that happy at Newcastle, but also I think he got word that he was asked to go back to Gadsden's, and so decided to do that. So for that period, Jeff was just some months old. We went back to live with Mum because we had nowhere to come to in Sydney, and then he'd come down to work on a Monday morning and stay down through the week, and come up and stay at Jemina over the weekend until we and then I went house hunting. That's right. I brought Jeffrey down for a week, I think, or a few days, and I'd go out house hunting and leave the baby with Letty, and found the house at Yagoona.
Right. And why Yagoona? Was it because it was
Look, I have a feeling because I think it was probably because I'd lived at Chester Hill, and I knew the Chester Hill, Bath Hill, Yagoona area, and my brother lived at Bath Hill, so you sort of it sort of happened that way, and some of the houses weren't worth looking at, but the house we finally settled on was a nice house, and it had a nice yard.
Yes. A huge yard, as I recall. I remember it being very big, and I remember the plum tree in the backyard. The
plum tree, that's right.
I remember that being a huge tree.
The story, yes, exactly.
And then I went back, as an adult, and sort of looked over the fence, and there's this tiny little thing.
Yes, but it had nice plums. I made lots of plum jam. Yes, so that's how that happened. I think we were probably with Mum for a few months, and then it was a matter of we had to try and find somewhere permanent to live, and that's what we found. And the area, well, as we said, it was the automatic area to go to, I think, because we knew that area, Mum used to often come down, by the way. Mum was fantastic then. Jeff was born in Newcastle, but when you were due, she came down and stayed, so that she was there when you were born, and I could go off to hospital, and Dick was working, and she looked after Jeffrey because he was only 21 months old when you were born. Yeah.
Do you remember? This is my memory that I'm asking you to
yes, clarify it.
Tell me about. But I remember going off on a fishing trip with Arthur, with Uncle Arthur.
To Woi Woi.
To Woi Woi, yeah.
Have you still got that fish?
Seahorse. Seahorse. That was then, was it? I wasn't sure.
That was then, yes.
Right, yes, I do still have the seahorse.
Good.
It's a very dried up little seahorse.
It was. Yes, that's right. It sat on the shelf at Ryde for all that time, and then I think I gave it to you. Yeah, that was, I understand the story was that he took you fishing under Woi Woi Bridge, or at Woi Woi Bridge.
Right.
And somebody hooked the seahorse. Was it you or him? I don't know.
Well, I believe it was me, but
that's what I.
But
was,
only because I've been told. That
was definitely what was in my head. Yes, that you hooked the seahorse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's why I ended up with it. But
yes, because he was the keen fisherman. Yes.
Yeah. No, I remember. I remember being in the car, driving. It must have been at night. We must have left on a Friday evening or something.
Okay.
But I remember, undertaking the trip with some trepidation because, he was this big, gruff character.
Yes, isn't that interesting?
Going off in his charge, I was a little bit nervous about it.
How old were you? Do you have any recollection?
No, none at all.
I mean, you wouldn't have been 5. You'd have been on a bit, I suppose. I can't remember, but I do remember being told that you'd caught it at Woi Woi Bridge, whether you had gone down the other end and gone underneath, or whether you'd actually hooked it from the bridge. Yes, yeah. Look, he was a lot of gruff. I imagine that taking you away, he'd have been absolutely fine.
Oh yeah.
No problems at all. He wouldn't take nonsense, I don't think. I think his kids suffered. I think Arthur's kids were a bit hard done by at times.
I'm sure he was a disciplinarian.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, yes, he was very hard, I think, on them. But I'm sure taking you like that, he'd have been absolutely fine.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh, it was his idea, I suppose. And
Yes.
maybe did you like fishing? I can't remember. But anyway, look what you got. You got a seahorse.
I think so. I got a seahorse, yeah.